I am very excited to be here today, and so I just want to welcome parents and students. I am Emily Collins. I'm your supervisor for secondary math, and I first and foremost just want to thank you for joining us today. One of the things, a couple things we'll be able to go over today is about our instruction, our practices, and our assessment. You know, how it looks in the classes, and what is it that you could do in order to support your child as they're navigating their way through high school. So we want to just have it's going to be formal but informal. So if there's points in the presentation where you have some questions, definitely let me know. Feel free to just come off of mute and go ahead and ask me a question, but I will pause periodically so that we could discuss and answer any of those questions that you may have. I am going to cut my camera off just for buffering purposes to make sure that I'm able to stay connected with you, but we'll go ahead and get started. So again, after this session, you'll be able to look at really three big things, I think, for the focus for this year, for the 21-22 school year. Really gain a deeper understanding of the changes in Florida standards. We have some changes that are coming our way, and it will affect your child. And, you know, what are the expectations for Duval County public school students this school year? The second thing, we'll have a chance to just understand what does it look like for your child in their classroom. You know, if they're bringing their backpacks home, what are you expecting to see in those backpacks? And how can you support the learning when they're home and not in the school building? And then lastly, we'll go over some resources that are available in order to support your student. Now, I like to go ahead and start just some of the research, some of the books that I like to read. I'll just tell you that. Not everything mathematical, but of course I do love mathematics. Well, there's this author. She's a great author especially when it comes to mathematics, right? It turns out, you know, high school, of course, we know middle school was a very, very pivotal transition time, but high school is that transition time as our students learn to be adults. You know, they're learning to occupy the world that they will eventually live in. So when that happens, you know, the math and the cognitive problem solving strategies that they've learned in early grades, they carry those things on, and they really have to dig a little bit deeper into what we call as conceptual and abstract understanding, and really connecting that to new math. Now, of course, what happens with that, it creates a lot of emotional attitudes and connections towards math. Sometimes they'll get to a course and they'll say, man, I love math and I'm just going to love it until the rest of my life. And then other times, some of those barriers that they may run into, it maybe make them not have connections, and they may not enjoy math as much as, you know, they would like. And I'll just say, let's face it, there's going to be a combination of in-class, online, hybrid, and remote learning. It is here to stay. And I know all of us, we're doing our best in order to adjust to it. So one of the things I always say, if we truly want to improve our math rigor in education for all students, we definitely want to change some of the way we promote how we look at traditional time tests and memorization and speed and those things there. So we are asking your child to just slow down a little bit and look a little deeper into the problems. Help us to problem solve. Help us to find maps in order to figure out how do we get from A to B. So with this author, and I'll just go ahead and read the statement, but she says, we don't need students to calculate quickly in math. We need students who can ask good questions, who can map out pathways, who can reason about complex solutions, who can set up models and also communicate in different forms. If we were to look at a mathematics students that is in high school, this is a perfect statement what we're looking at. Because if a student is able to do much of what's stated within that statement, they're going to do great when it's time for them to occupy the world as they become an adult. So as we continue on and to just learning more about your high school student and how do they navigate with math through high school, I do want you to keep this in mind. Math skills are so important. So understand that students within with just the 1 year of math beyond Algebra 2, that means they're going to pre-calculus, or that means they're going maybe even to math for college readiness. They were twice as likely to get a college degree or certificate. So very important. So whether they're going to college or whether they're going to, start with a skill or a career, they're twice as likely in order to get that, right? And so we focus on in high school, what are those judgment and decision making, and that communication that we can have in the class that they learn to be fluent with, and they can take that into the real world. So definitely remember, and I'll lastly say this, math is everywhere. Of all the occupations, about 70% of it does require mathematical knowledge in order to be important for having a skill in many of those occupations. So here's some expectations for the 2021-2022 school year. Well, this year, our teachers in grades 9 through 12, they're using our current standards, which I like to call MAFs. We call them MAF, M-A-F-S, and these are our current standards for mathematics within their classroom. And you'll know if a student is in Algebra 1 or a student is in geometry, these standards are very important, simply because the Algebra 1, it has a graduation requirement that is attached to the use of your student being successful at passing these standards within that course. So this year within our district, one of the things that we're working on with our teachers, with our schools, we're strengthening the way that our mathematics interventions are being done. We want to be able to get into our classrooms to make sure that our standard expectations, that they are clear and concise. What your child is being communicated, it is easy for them to understand, the expectations of them in meeting that task or that particular standard for the day. And the other thing is our content priorities, just making sure that our students, if they're in Algebra 1A or some of our prep courses, that they're prepared to be successful in the courses that prepare them to be prepared for college. And you'll see a lot of this happens with our double block support. So you'll have a student that will have a core class, and they're going to take, and I'll just give an example of Algebra 1. They're going to go through their Algebra 1 course in the core class. They're going to learn that lesson. They're going to make those new connections, but they have another level of support where they can practice on grade level work, as well as some of the gap material that they may have missed for the prior year. Now, I'll tell you why this is so important. And I don't know if you've heard or not, for the 2022 and the 2023 school year, we have brand new standards. Okay, so this is the last year that your students, especially if they're in Algebra 1 or geometry, will be tested on our current Florida standards. Now, what happened was our governor, he asked for some changes within our standards. So we ended up having what we call as an executive order 1932. And with this executive order, it was a redesign of the way our standards are presented to teachers, to students. They even included parents. So what that means for you, you're going to be able to look at the standards that your child is doing in each course, and you're going to be able to read it clear and concisely, being able to understand it from a parent reading it, from a student reading it, from a teacher reading it. Everyone will have an opportunity to clearly understand what is expected of a student in a course. Now, you'll notice that ELA standards have already been adopted, and that's our English language arts. But math, we're going through a couple things this year. We're going through a book adoption, and then we're transitioning to new standards. So I will kind of put a plug there. If any parent would like to participate within our book adoption, because our stakeholders are so very important, please reach out to me. My email address will be at the very end of this presentation. But please reach out so that we can get you involved in making sure we're preparing the right products and materials and instructional materials that your child needs in order to be successful. So I'm going to stop right here just in case we may have any questions before I move on. All right, so let's continue on. So here's what's so important. I do want you to take a chance to look at our 2021-2022 assessments. One of the first things that's going to come up this year for your child is what we call our PMA. It's our Progress Monitoring Assessment. So for the first 9 weeks, and let's just say it's about 7 or 8 weeks, because some of that time they took baseline and those things there. But for about 7 weeks or 8 weeks of material that they learned, that they were taught, that they practiced, they're going to take a progress monitoring, I should call it, assessment. And that assessment is going to be sometime between September 28th and October 13th, depending upon the direction from the school. So that is the very first important thing that your child currently should be preparing for and practicing. And what we want to take from our progress monitoring assessment is, do I understand what was just taught to me? Okay. And so what happens is, if there's some low performance areas or something that's a little different, then it's definitely an opportunity to get with the teacher and allow some spiraling and some practice of skills already learned as you move further and closer to the end of the year. The second most important thing that you see there will be the PSAT. I always put 8th and 9th grade, because what I like to remind parents is that, man, your student sometimes took this in 8th grade. Now we have a select few of our students that take this in 8th grade. And then a student takes the PSAT again in 9th grade. And then it continues to go further. And I'll put additional grades on there. I think it's on a different slide. But we also have 10th grade, which is our predominant grade in high school that takes our PSAT. And then we'll have 11th grade that will take the PSAT. And it's so important for the 11th grade because that can get them into the National Merit Scholarship program there. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. So this is one thing that I do want to just kind of put as a sticky note, I guess, with you, is to have your child for at least this month. It's almost about a month of time that they can practice on the PSAT. And the reason why I say that is a good practice for SAT, as well as if you're looking for a child who may have not passed our Algebra 1 exam, the end of course, you can look for the PSAT to see if you can use that score as what we call as a concordance score. And then the last thing, if your child is a senior, if they're a 12th grader, and let's just say they have not met the graduation requirement, we will have multiple opportunities where students will be able to take a in-school SAT test in order to meet what we call as the concordance score for passing to meet that graduation requirement. One of the first ones for that SAT for 12th graders will be October 13th as well. So what I'm showing you on this slide right here is the assessment dates for this year. These are some of the most important dates, obviously, because they're the FSA end of course exam. At the top right, you're looking at both of our ELA as well as our Algebra 1 retakes. So there are some students that may have went to the next grade level, but they're going to have an opportunity in order to retake the test a number of times and to get the score that is needed. And then you'll see our end of course exams. Typically May 2nd through the 27th is the big window where we're pushing the practice and just preparing students for the FSA end of course. And that's when the bulk of our students will end up taking that. Right. Any questions on this slide? Let me go into FSA scoring. So right now, your child has their score. You can currently see if they're a level 3, which means they're proficient, they're doing a great job, they're where they need to be, or are they a level 1 or somewhere in between, because this can help you understand what is expected of your child. Is it, a growth aspect, or do they need to get to proficiency in order to meet certain expectations of the course and or graduation? So you can find this information here in Focus. You can tell their current FSA score. And from last year's test, at least if they sat for that. If not, you probably have to look at maybe 2018, 2019 score. But definitely take a chance to look at this so that when you're meeting with teachers, you're able to ask your teachers, what is needed in order to help my child get to what we call as the next bucket So you'll ask them, what is needed to help my child get to a next level of performance? And they should be able to tell you some strategies and some of the expectations that is needed for the child to be on that particular level. Now, if you're in a situation where you took algebra and let's say you did not meet a proficient score, so if you're looking here on this table here, if I look at Algebra 1 end of course, and I'm going over until about the third section there, you see a 497. If I have a student that did not make a 497, that just means they did not pass the Algebra end of course. Well, again, we talk about this quite often, it's a graduation requirement. But don't fret, there are multiple opportunities in order to retake the Algebra 1 end of course test, but there are also, if you see here at the bottom, this concordance score, there's also opportunities to use the PSAT, the SAT, the ACT, as well as the geometry end of course in order to help a student to pass and meet the graduation requirement. Now, PERT, you'll see at the bottom, we used to have PERT and kids really love using that. But as you can see, we really don't have any students that have entered ninth grade for 2018 to 2019. Those students are graduated. So those top four are the ones that we can use as alternate type of performance scores to meet our graduation requirement. So there's always safety nets in order to make sure that your students are successful. Any questions? All right, so I'll just say this again. I'm going to hone in on PSAT because it's right around the corner and it's coming. So remember, as we look at our readiness, for high school and then our readiness for college, this is how our PSAT helps us out. The PSAT, it is not sent to colleges, but it definitely can help you pinpoint some of the areas that you need improvement in order to be successful on an SAT, which is our college entrance exam. I know I'm giving you a lot of information, but I just want to make sure that I get you on a success path. Once your child has taken that PSAT, what I do love about it, you can link this PSAT score to their Khan Academy account. And from there, you'll receive a free personalized study plan, and it will be based on what your child did on the test. And they'll just kind of put them on a path to where they would need more help in certain areas. Now, as your student practices and they show mastery of the material, the questions, they do become more challenging, and that's by design, and they should be, so that they can prepare the student for the test day. So the biggest thing to this, you definitely want to take a lot of the practice tests that are available on Khan Academy multiple times, and you'll see how you perform and what you're struggling with. And again, once you register on College Board as well, even for our 11th grade students, they'll be able to get into what we call as a National Merit Scholarship Program. So I'll repeat that. So what happens is you're going to take this PSAT at 9th, and then you're going to have some opportunities after that to take the PSAT. So if you're practicing and you're preparing at the 11th grade level, you could get a really, really good score, and that can help you gain access to a wealth of information about the scholarships, the colleges, and the careers. But there's a $160 million scholarship bank that's out there that's connected to PSAT. So that is so very important. So really, we have less than 1 month to practice. 1 month to practice. And and treat it, especially if you're in 9th grade, treat it like a baseline. Take it serious. Let it provide great feedback for you. And I guarantee you that if your student practices at least 20 hours, and I'm not saying 20 hours a day, not even saying 20 hours a week, but if your child practices at least 20 hours using that Khan Academy, typically on average, they saw about 115-point gain in their scores. So PSAT is important. I'll just kind of leave you with that. Any questions on PSAT?
I have a question for you, Ms. Collins. You said we could connect the PSAT score to Khan Academy, so that Khan Academy, I believe you said, would provide courses or lessons based on the weaknesses. How do you connect the two? How do you start that process?
Okay, so that is a good question, and I probably should have got you some links, but you can go right to Khan Academy and you can register your student. They will ask you information about whether you have a score already. If you don't have, even if you don't have a score, it's okay, because when you get on Khan Academy, you can actually take their, I like to call it adaptive test, but you can take their test on Khan Academy, and it will also give you a pathway. So I'll have to look for the
Perfect.
exact
Thank
the
you.
registration is to get that to you.
Nope, that was great. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Quickie question follow
Yeah.
up. So Khan, is that KHAN, Khan Academy?
Yes. So Khan Academy is. Let me see if I can put a link in the. But it's KHAN. But I'm going to put a link in here really quick. This may not be exactly to where you need to be, but I just want to give you some reference, so I can throw it in the chat so you can have it. And that's a place you can visit for SAT as well. Okay, so as we jump a little bit further, what does your child learn in high school? Well, middle school brought some connectability, I should say. When they get in high school, they're kind of past the fluency piece, so they still deal with algebra, all about relationships, but they get deeper into functions and talking about how do these graphs look and how does the equation, the function connect to the graph? And then on top of that, how can I put this in a real world context? So it gets a little bit deeper, which is why we want your students to talk. We want them to collaborate, right? And then they get into geometry, which adds on some of our trigonometry. I abbreviated it, but it's trigonometry. And that's just kind of our spatial understanding. So I'm taking some of what I learned in the algebra world, and I'm dealing with slopes and parallel perpendicular lines, but I'm attaching those to polygons, to figures, and we're looking in the coordinate system, and we're learning about constructing, and we're dealing with triangles and those things there. And then I get into probability and statistics, all about predictions and making sense of things. Can I have 10 people and take a survey and make sure that it's valid? And connecting that to the real world. And we're hoping that your kid has a great high school math career, right? And make it all the way to calculus. And we'll make it to college too, but make it to calculus. And they'll deal with what they learned in connecting those expressions, equations, and functions, but they take it into a higher level world. And we're in each of these, I like to call them, I guess, domains, but in each of these, we look at mathematical reasoning. We try to put every single thing that we deal with in the real world. How can we connect it? So your students will work with numbers in algebra sense and measurement and geometry. They're going to work with rational, irrational, all different types of numbers, integers, you name it. They're going to be interpreting these algebraic expressions and analyzing functions. And then they're going to take those real world situations and use mathematics to understand the situation better and then make those informed decisions. And lastly, a lot of proving of theorems in those ways in which they describe those geometric properties. So in other words, they learn a lot in high school math. It's the point of putting everything that they learned from the starting in elementary with whole numbers and all of those things there, and getting into middle school and beginning that algebra work, and then extending it out into high school. So it is a lot. The level of the work becomes a little bit different. So as I give you an example of Algebra 1, here's an example that your student can get on an end of course exam, okay? And so, well, of course, all of us know the square root of 25. Well, that's not what they're being asked on our FSA end of course. It's not just about the square root of 25. It's about structure. How can I rewrite this from a radical form to where it's the root of 25, but how can I rewrite this to prove that that root of 25 is also equal and equivalent to 25 raised to the 1/2 power? So they're living in the rational exponents world when they're dealing with this. And these are the difficult tasks to where we're asking students to share their thinking. This is where it becomes so much tougher in Algebra 1 as opposed to, pre-algebra and some of the 7th grade work when they were just beginning with these relationships of numbers. So let me stop right there and see if you have any questions before I move on. I know I'm kind of going through it. All right, no questions. Okay, so here's some things that you can do, parents, just to keep the conversation focused when you're talking with the teacher. Make sure you're reaching out to your child's teacher. Ask them questions about your student's performance. Ask them things such as, does my child have a strong grounding in arithmetic? Are they fluently able to do the operations such as with fractions or decimals or negative numbers? These are important building blocks, because if they're not able to, then this is some of the practice work that can be sent home with your child, or we can use some of the supplemental resources, our tier 2 resources that we have in order to support closing some of the gaps so that they can be very well versed for on grade level type of practice. Here's another question. Does my child take a thinking approach to algebra and work algebraic symbols fluently? Do they think through process? Is there more than one way that they can get an answer? Is there, sometimes that they can explain it thoroughly to you? Can they connect it to real world content? You can also ask, is my child comfortable using coordinates in algebra and geometry? They're going to use the coordinate system, ordered pairs, all those things there in many of the math classes in high school. You can also ask to see your child's work. If you want to see how they're performing on an assessment, you want to see if they're showing their work, you want to see where it is that they are getting stuck. You want to see the feedback that the teacher has given to the student. These are always great opportunities to have that conversation about your child's performance. But really the key to it, be sure that you're asking about extra support, because a lot of times now, especially with having teams and the virtual world that we're able to live in, there's support available when we have lunch and learns. There's support available after school, before school, even in some of our intensive math type of classes. And then lastly, and this is really for the students, and for parents, but have a growth mindset. So very important that you're understanding, I don't know it yet, but I'll get it. With practice, I'll be able to get it. And it's so very important that our students and parents, all of our stakeholders, are having that particular mindset. So as you're home, what you can do to help your students to succeed, just be sure that you're staying involved. That's the biggest thing. Stay informed. If the school is sending home newsletters, if there's a school board meeting, if your child is mentioning something they want you to be a part of, just stay informed, stay engaged. That is the best way in order to support your student. Now, there are many ways that you can help. And I know that reading, most people say, well, reading is not in math. Yes, it is. Reading, there's a lot of reading in math. The more and more that you can even read with your children, it helps them to be successful. It's so very important. And we have a problem-solving strategy that we like to use with our contextual type of problems. And we ask our kids to read those questions twice before they even answer. Many of our students, they will answer a question perfectly, but they did not answer what the question was asking them to answer. So it's a very, very important piece as we build into our math world. Review and discuss their homework. Go over their homework with your child. You may not know how to do it, but that's okay. Just have your child explain to you what it was that they worked on in class and what they did. Communicate with your teachers. I think we talked about that enough. Attend public meetings to learn more. So we have some changes that are going on with the state of Florida. We are changing the way that our standards are being delivered, right? They're now going to be benchmarks, and they're going to be a little bit different. And then now, just recently, this week, we're changing the way that assessment is going to be given. So those FSA end of course, that's going to be a change, and progress monitoring is going to bring on a different aspect when it's an opportunity for children to grow within even the same school year. Learn about the standards and how they affect your child's education in school. And that's so very important because you want to know the graduation requirements and what we discussed a little bit earlier. And then look through your child's backpack each afternoon. That is so very important. Now, I'm going to tell you what this looks like. So when I say look through their backpack, here's some things that you should see. So one of the first things you're going to see, there's real world examples that promote what our students learn in English and math that makes more sense. Okay, so sometimes you may not see that problem solving, that real world that says, oh, okay, I went to the Grand Canyon and I used this equation. Sometimes you just won't see that. You'll see more connected type of real world problems for maybe things that happen in Florida, maybe things that's going on in the world currently, but you're taking the math and you're being able to connect that to a real world. You should see some of the things like that in their book, in their backpack. Here's another thing. We have many supplemental online course support for continuation of practice. So I'm going to give an example for this year with one of our programs that we provide support with. Our students are able to go on and practice with their on grade level support. So what that means is in class, a student is going to learn the material, right? And they may end up struggling with the material, but that's okay because the teacher would have assigned some practice work through some of our supplemental online programs that they can practice on grade level practice material that they're expected to be successful at for that particular school year. Now, there's also opportunities to some of the things they're struggling with to be able to practice with as long as the teacher is able to assign that out to them. Here's another thing you're going to see. Math that requires students to use justification instead of just procedural work. Okay, so your teachers, they may ask the students to say, hey, talk me through how you solve this. Or in fact, I know you got the answer and it looks pretty good. Please justify for me, why is this the appropriate answer? And with Common Core, of course, and some people call it a new math, but with Common Core, it allows us to have this collaborative type of learning environment to where we're getting students to talk about what is it that you're thinking? What is it that you're thinking? There's not just one way to get to problems many times. We're talking to students about what it is that they're thinking and being able to put that on paper. Here's another thing, math homework that asks students to write how they got the answer. And I kind of talked about that a little bit. Math homework that asks students to use different methods to solve the same problem. And that's okay. And we talk to students about this all the time. It's just like if you and I was taking a trip to Miami. I'll just use Miami, for example. I know the location of Miami. You may know the location of Miami, but the way we map out driving to Miami may be totally different. One of you and I'll put it on me. I may go I-10 way and go 75 and go the long way, and you say, oh no, it's really quick if I just go straight down 95 and I'll get to Miami within this amount of time. So much of what we do in the classroom is saying that students, I know you know how to get from here to Miami. Let's find the best route. Let's map out our thinking to make sure that we are proficiently and efficiently, I should say, solving the problems in the way that we need to. So here's some questions to ask your child. Did you work with others collaboratively today? You know, what types of tasks did you find hard today? And most of the time, they'll easily tell you what tasks they found hard. Ask them to tell you something that they learned in math that's needed for their career. So very important. And then you can also ask them, how did you use math today? Can you show me an example? Just so you're aware of what they're doing day in and day out in their classroom. Did you feel you had any type of growth of your mathematical knowledge today? You know, what type of new learning took place? What new connections did you make that could be useful as you're going throughout the year? And then also, what math problems did you do today? How did you get your answer? And just really asking questions so that you're involved to see if they're struggling or not. Because if a student is struggling, that's when we want to ask out for help and try to figure out how do we correct that before it gets a little bit deeper. Parents, I just want you to also remind you when you're helping your students with their homework, and I know there's YouTube, there's so many different programs where you can just kind of log on and get answers, and I know how it goes, but really take a chance to get with your child and just ask them, you know, what is the goal of the problem? What is the problem asking you? Just so you can give them some reference of how to map it out. Ask them, why does this step work? And, you know, why would you want to do that in this next step? You know, does it make sense? What does this step in the process accomplish? How do you know if this answer is even reasonable? And can you check your work to make sure that it makes sense to you? If we do a better job at asking questions and not just giving answers, typically it allows our kids, in order to persevere through their tasks, and eventually they'll get to that answer just using some of the strategies that they have built. So with that saying, it's so very important that you understand math takes a lot of practice. It's just one of those building foundational type of subjects that will continue from when you're very little until you're my age and older, right? It takes a lot of practice. Now, I always give the basketball scenario because I'm a basketball person, and here's what happens every single time. I've coached basketball for years, and it doesn't matter. The student or the child that I get that comes in and doesn't know any type of basketball, I take them through the same drills and practice that a child that has been playing basketball for 10 to 15 years does. So both of those types of students, for instance, they will have the same type of practice. And here's what you'll know. When you're playing basketball, it really starts off with making layups. In all honesty, it's kind of the smallest, and it's layups and dribbling. That's the two things that you probably first learn. Well, you're going to start off with dribbling. You're going to make these layups. You're going to get really good at it. Then you're going to get good at making free throws. And then you're going to be able to make a 10-foot shot. And then you're going to go to the three-point line. And then you're going to learn how to play really good defense. And then you're going to get so good, you know how to put it all together, and you know how to play team offense and team defense, right? Well, it's the same thing with math. Okay, you're going to take those building blocks and you're going to practice them every single day, every single week, so that you become successful at it. So the same kid, like I say, and I have kids that have went to college and they've played, but they go to the gym and they still do free throws, dribbling, 10-foot shots, defense, team, offense. They still do all of the same things because they're practicing for success. So I want you to make sure, I want to make sure that you keep that, and this is really for your students, but make sure that you keep that in your mind, that it's just a lot of practice and you will get it over time. So as you look at this with math, when we begin with our fluency and procedural skills, some of that multiplication facts, some of those things you learned very early, you want to continue to practice it so that it can make you quicker. So when we get to SAT or a time test, you'll be able to fluently get through many of the problems because you have fluently and procedurally been successful with some of the building blocks. And then you'll get to where you graduate to conceptual understanding. So you'll be able to understand, you'll make connections of things. You'll say, okay, well, I know this already, so I'm learning this new material here. You're able to piece some things together and really understand it, so much so that you can explain it to others. And then the last part of that is just the application piece. You can put it into the real world. You can take anything and you can apply that knowledge. So you can put the whole thing together, in other words, and be able to make that statement on that. So I just leave you with that. Math takes a lot of practice. Don't be afraid to practice. I'm not saying all day. I'm just saying maybe 30 minutes a day, but don't be afraid to practice in order to make, like we like to say, to make perfect. So I do want to remind you our online resources for parents. If you go to duvalschools.org, this information is still kind of in the middle of the page. It's still there, but you'll be able to get to Focus. You'll be able to get to our blended learning platform, and you'll be able to go to OneView. Now, once you click on OneView, I just want to remind you, when you go to the parent section in OneView, you'll be able to see all of these particular different things, objectives that you can pull out if you need more information with. If your child is home over the weekend or in the afternoon and they're having problems with their laptop or getting onto some type of software, please make sure you reach out to our service desk so that we're able to support them so that they're able to practice their skills there. Now, I do want to let you know, these are some of our resources that we're using for our core classes, as well as some of our intensive math or supplemental classes for this year in our high school. So Study Island probably is one of the newest ones. Study Island, just so you know, it's a research-based supplemental program. It will provide about 20 to 30 questions per topic that they're working on. And it provides that lesson to support the continuation of learning from what your child learns in the core class. Now, this is really practice of on grade level, but you do have where teachers can assign, let's say I have an Algebra 1 student and they're struggling with a topic that they learned in 7th grade. The teacher does have the option of assigning a 7th grade practice assignment so that your student can work on that unfinished learning that they have from 7th grade to make sure that they're able to know it and, you know, connect what they need to on grade level. So that is a really good thing, I think, that teachers and students are enjoying this year. I do want to remind you that we have Algebra Nation. Algebra Nation is so very helpful. Not only is it showing videos of what our core objectives are for our algebra and geometry courses, but students also have access to our SAT and ACT type of practice that is located in our Algebra Nation platform. So take a chance, students, especially if you don't visit this often, this is a great place to be in order to get you some skills practice there. All right, and so I do want to remind you there are a lot of resources at your fingertips. So I put FLDOE, of course, first. It's one of the, and you can search it from FLDOE or FDOE, both of those, but you'll be able to find some of the changes that's going on with the state of Florida and with the math instruction and how it is affecting all stakeholders. So just stay abreast of that. FloridaStudents.org, it's really linked to our CPOM site. This gives students additional practice if they needed to have, videos, something they learned in class and they needed more information based off of, the standards that was given from the teachers. They're able to visit the FloridaStudents.org and find more information for them to view to help them out. PSAT practice, this is a full link here, and I'll probably get a way to get this in the chat for you as well. But this is where you can go to do some PSAT practice, and then Khan Academy SAT registration. You can always go here in order to practice within the Khan Academy suite as well. So I'm to the end. So I'll just let you know, and I do appreciate your time today. We always want to hear from parents. This is always good because we like to get you involved. It's just what we do, right? So if you have any questions, please email me anytime. My director as well, which is Ms. Jasmine Walker, K-12 Math Director. Feel free to email either one of us, and we'll do our best in order to assist you with what we can. But I'm going to open the floor to any questions that you may have, and this is the great piece here, because then we get to have some dialogue, and you're just not just listening to me. But I'm going to open up the floor and come off of mute and let me know what questions you have.
So some of those sites you were just talking about on the previous screen.
Yeah.
How do you get to those? Did I hear you say like Studyology? What is that, and how do you get to that?
All right, so that's a very, very good question. So on our blended learning platform, we have what we call a single sign-on. So when our students are in the buildings, they will click on blended learning, and all of these icons they're going to see. When they click on the icon, it's going to automatically sign them in because they're signed in for single sign-on. And so that's how they would access the material that's assigned to them, in other words, from their teacher.
Okay, because I was a little confused because my granddaughter's teacher sent me some maybe links today, but when I tried to click on them, I couldn't get in. And I think she had even emailed me saying, sort of like my granddaughter would have to get into them and then we could do them together, but maybe it's just part of the software on the computers or something? I don't know.
It could be, but normally what happens, and let me see if I can get if I can show you here.
I mean, I can't just Google studyology, can I?
No,
Okay,
no. So what happens is because we are a single sign-on, that means that their registration to our platforms, it's attached to their course codes. So what happens is, and I'll just kind of explain, what happens is with a single sign-on, students just click a button, and whatever their Duval County login and registration is, that's what they are put in, and it'll automatically log them in.
Okay, so as long as she can get to it, we can do it together. That's fine.
Yeah, so she should be able to get to it.
Okay.
We have a I'm gonna pull it up 1 second. Let me go back and share this for you. So this is the Duval County School Board website. So this is duvalschools.org, in other words. When she's on this site here, as soon as she scrolls down, this little blue strip here is typically where they would want to go. Well, when she clicks on blended learning, all of these little icons here, she's going to click on these icons. So like for me, if I was to click on Algebra Nation, for instance, this is my single sign-on. So it's going to say, okay, well, what's your DCPS login? And I'll type that in. I don't want to type it in, but I guess I will.
No, that's fine. And I saw where it said parents below you. I've clicked on that and I've gone in before.
So what it has done, it has single signed me in. And so now I'm able to get into the Algebra Nation platform. And so as she navigates this, so let's say she's in Algebra 1, these are all the courses that we have available currently in the Algebra Nation, and they're called Math Nation and Algebra Nation, but these are the courses that we have available here.
Okay.
So if we have a student that's struggling with algebra and they've came to high school and let's say they're in Algebra 1A, we'll say, you know what, here's a great on-ramp to Algebra 1A. So we'll have the student go here and we'll say, we first want you to take what we call as a pretest. And after they take a pretest, they're going to assign the students to one of these domains to start in. And the kids will come on here and just practice. They'll listen to videos and they'll have some practice and then some assessment.
Okay, perfect.
But that is a way, and that's a great question, but this is a way in order to get to all of the software that's available. Not every one of these software pieces. For instance, I know BrainPop is probably still there, but like Chalk Talk is for ELA, is for English and Language Arts, as well as Common Lit and certain other icons. But for the ones that we use, you'll be able to see, and this is our middle school here. This is elementary for iReady, but you'll be able to see the ones that she or he will be able to click on in order to access for practice.
On behalf of Parent Academy, I would like to thank you for being here. Of course, Ms. Collins, you're such a pleasure to have. We appreciate you. Have a great night.